In this video I'm sharing 5 tips to help you level up your editing faster than I did. Each one on its own can make a massive difference, but if you do all of them, then it will be a total game changer for your photography. So to start, let me show you one thing you can do to immediately solve the problem of inconsistent results. Because there's nothing worse than knocking an edit out of the park 1 minute and then being totally disappointed with how your very next photo turns out. Now the reason it happens is simple, but for some reason it took me so long to figure it out for myself. It's like this: imagine you're a carpenter who needs to build a chair a day for 10 days in a row. You have a good gist of the techniques for cutting pieces of wood and putting them all together, but you don't have a blueprint for making a chair, so you have to wing it each time. And then at the end of the 10 days, you've got 10 chairs, but you end up disappointed because they're not all completely identical. I mean, if you're a master carpenter with decades of practice, then you probably could have done it without a blueprint, but if you're anything less than a master, then you really need that blueprint. And it's the same for your photo editing. And if you're watching this video, then the chances are your editing could be improved by following a blueprint or a workflow. In other words, by making the same editing decisions in the same order every time you edit a photo. When I rearranged all the individual techniques and tips and tricks that I'd learned over the years into a consistent 6-stage step-by-step workflow, my consistency skyrocketed. And since then, I've taught that same workflow to tens of thousands of photographers in a free guide that you can download from the link in the description and pinned comment, because a consistent workflow creates consistent results. But next, I want to show you a quick tip to help you make your edits look more dynamic, because this is another one it took me years to discover, but only a minute to learn. And ever since then, it's been an important tool for avoiding flat landscape edits. Because one of the tricky things about editing landscapes is that the more colourful the scene is, the more likely we are to get distracted by the colours and overlook what's happening with light. And this can lead to colourful but flat looking images. So a great way to actually solve this is to periodically check what your image looks like in black and white. Because if the light doesn't look good in black and white, then it probably doesn't look great in colour. And this next tip is guaranteed to give you at least 10% more portfolio level photos than you have right now, without you even taking another shot. Because I used to think that every pixel was sacred and that anything less than the full resolution of my raw files was unacceptable, which meant if I didn't absolutely nail a composition in camera, then that shot was a write-off. And what I wish I realised sooner is that I'd much rather have a perfectly composed image at half the resolution than a wonky composition at full resolution. So I started taking those compositions that didn't quite work out and cropping them for composition. Sure, I might not be able to print them as large as I'd have been able to at full res, but A, I have a lot more great looking photos to show for my same efforts. B, are we really printing all of our photos large and putting them on the wall, or just a select few? And C, have you seen how good the super resolution is in Lightroom and Camera Raw anyway? Now, if you'd like me to work with you one-on-one to improve your composition and any other aspect of your landscape photography for that matter, I've just reopened my Snapshot to Centerpiece coaching program. So you can click the link in the description or pinned comment to learn more and apply. Now again, this next tip took me way too long to stumble across, and when I eventually did, it made me realise a big flaw in a lot of my old photos. So many of them would end up being colourful, full of contrast, but still somehow flat. And I didn't realise it because at the time I didn't truly understand how to edit for the kind of depth that makes you feel like you can step right into a photo. And it had absolutely everything to do with how I used contrast. Now, it wasn't the specific techniques that were the problem. I was already using advanced techniques like luminosity masking to make incredibly accurate selective contrast adjustments. The problem was that I was choosing to enhance contrast in all the right places and all the wrong places. So what are the right and the wrong places? Well, a few years ago, when I started looking at how painters create a realistic sense of depth in a landscape painting, I realised where I was going wrong in my photo editing. You know, how were they able to make one thing look far away and another thing look near? Now, check out this amazingly high quality painting I just made in Photoshop. One small and one large grassy hill next to each other. Or is it two large grassy hills but one's further away? It's impossible to tell, right? And the reason you can't tell is there's no atmospheric perspective, which is the effect that particles in the air have on the visibility of things in the distance. And that effect is usually lower contrast in the distance. So when I reduce the contrast of this small hill, it immediately starts receding into the distance. And check this out. Which one looks closer now? Anyway, when I applied this idea to my photo editing and stopped pushing the contrast to the max in all areas of my image, regardless of distance, suddenly my photos gained a sense of depth and felt more three-dimensional than ever. Now, having said that, it might cause problems if you start using this in all your edits, but this next tip will make sure that it doesn't. Because if you've ever learned a whole bunch of new editing techniques, or even just one, only to be left frustrated because they didn't work the same as they did for the person you learned them from, then this next tip might be the most important one in the entire video. Because it's easy to get carried away with the excitement of learning a cool technique or effect in Photoshop, and you feel the urge to use it all the time. I definitely used to do this exact same thing, but there's a massive problem with that approach, which I call technique-first editing. As in, you start off with a technique in mind that you want to use, and then you try to shoehorn it into your edit, whether it's going to work or not. It's like you're doing some DIY and you really want to use your hammer, but the next job on the list is to screw a new shelf into the wall. Are you going to go technique first and bang those screws in with the hammer that you've got in your hand? Or are you going to choose an outcome first approach, realizing what the job needs and then choosing the right tool for that job? An outcome first approach to editing means having a vision for your finished edit in mind and then using the most appropriate tools or techniques that can give you that result. And the good thing about following that free workflow guide I mentioned earlier in the video is that it's specifically designed to help you organize all the individual techniques that you've learned and slot them into an entire end-to-end outcome-first approach to editing. So at each stage of the edit, you actually have a goal, and wherever you are right now in your editing, you have a set of techniques that you know how to use. So the task is then just about picking the right tool or technique for the goal at hand. Now, I do explain it in a lot more detail in the free guide, so to download that, just go to the link in the description or pinned comment. Or to discover the one single editing technique that literally changed my life, watch this next video.